Vic, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate your time. First question to get into it is, what's your relationship with Texas like? When did you first come to Texas? What were the circumstances?
I worked all over the States, but I've never actually worked in Texas. I did come here many years ago to Love Field, Fort Worth. When I was coming back, I think it was from Mexico, and I think it was on Conan. I'd finished Conan. I was flying back to Europe, and I was a private pilot in those days. I used to like flying, so I went to Love Field and did my night rating there. But that's the only association I've had with it. My family, my nephew lives in Austin now. He's a stuntman, and he loves it here. And I've got a lot of friends who've moved to Austin, so I'm looking forward to Monday and Tuesday catching up with them all in Austin. So I'm excited to be in Texas. It's fabulous.
Great. Well, welcome. I was doing a bit of research on your body of work, and I was really fascinated by your kind of origin story into the industry. Could you tell me a bit what was your first introduction into this line of work?
Like a lot of people, fate guided me towards it. I'm a great believer in fate. You can help your fate and your luck, as they say. But even before I started in the business, I had an interest in it because my father was a racehorse trainer, and one of his owners that he trained horses for was a very, very famous actor in the 50s called Richard Todd. He was Disney's Rob Roy, Disney's Robin Hood. He was in the Dam Busters, a very, very famous British actor. And he had horses with my father in training, and he'd come down at weekends and watch the horses do their gallops and things. So I'd meet him, and he'd turn up in a wonderful Rolls Royce with some some blonde woman with a fur coat. This is like the 50s glamour in those days. And he'd tell me about the films he'd worked on, and I'd go to the movies and watch them. And then lo and behold, in 1965, I was an amateur racing jockey, but it was an amateur because I was too big to be a professional to make a living at it. But I just loved racing horses, steeplechasing. And by chance, a stuntman called Jimmy Lodge came and used to ride the horses with us to exercise them. And he was working on this film called Arabesque with Gregory Peck and Sophia Loren, a huge movie in its day called Arabesque.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to borrow a horse, so I rented him a horse, and then they wanted somebody to come and ride. It was a big, huge chase with helicopters and Land Rovers and jeeps galloping through rivers and jumping off castles and things. And I went along and rode the horse for them, and the money was fantastic in those days. It was £20 a day, which is like $30 a day. But in those days, that was over the equivalent of a week's wages. And I thought, wow, just doing something as easy as riding horses.
Sounds
And
pretty
you get
good.
this money, this will do me. And I there and then made my mind up. I would try and do that as a profession, and I just chipped away at it and worked my way at it, and got very lucky on lots of my choices, and here I am 60 years later.
I have so many questions about your line of work because I feel like as a you have to sort of embody the director's vision, make it tangible physically, almost like a choreographer. But then you have this interesting relationship with when you're acting as a stunt double. It's really kind of intimately. I'm just curious, how do you approach the obvious is like Indiana Jones, your Ford's double. How do you like communicate with them? Are you kind of watching them walk and talk and emulating that in your physicality? And
You definitely have to do that, and it's all about creativity. As a stunt man, I'm a useless actor. I can't act, but as a stunt double, I can take on that cloak. And Harrison and I were very lucky. We both got the same sort of walk. We both similar shapes and sizes. Both got bad backs we've heard over years. It goes with the territory of when you work hard and things like that. So I would automatically be able to move like Harrison, and we looked alike, and we had this wonderful a kinship. It was wonderful. But even in the early days as a stuntman, I could see what had to be done, and it wasn't just go along, get blown up, or get shot, or crash a car. It was a creative input into the film. It's the reason you're doing it has a knock-on effect before and after. It's cause and effect. And I was a ninja in the very, very early days in '66, sliding down the ropes on a volcano. But for those few minutes you're doing that in the movie, you become that ninja, you take on the part. And I always equate it, as people say, what do you do for a living? I say, I play cowboys and Indians. Because basically that's what we're doing. We're living our fantasies, but you're taking on that. I guess an actor takes on a persona and a character when he plays somebody, but we do the same thing when we're playing that person. And you're thinking of, you know, if you're getting shot or falling somewhere, you have to think, well, now what's the next sequence going to be? Is he going to be wounded, or does he look as though he's dead? And you know that will affect how you deliver your action and things like that. It's quite involved but creative.
How are you not afraid? How do you get it past the fear? Because I imagine you're doing a lot of risky stuff, which there's a lot of care taken to make it safe. But I'm not doing that stuff if even if someone tells me it's safe.
It's all about rehearsal. That's one of the first things I learned was you have to rehearse, 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 rehearse. Because when you do a stunt, you're not just going up there, taking a deep breath and hoping you're going to survive. You have to be prepared maybe to do it 1, 2, 3, 4 more times, and which is a bit daunting. Each time you do it, it gets harder because you have a bruise from one fall or a pain from the other, and you start compensating. But it's rehearsal and having confidence that you can do it. Never accept something you don't feel you can do, but just rehearse it and go for it. When I was doing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I had to jump off the horse onto the tank, which is, you have to travel about 18 feet laterally off a galloping horse on the edge of a cliff and land. You have to jump over the tracks of this tank. That's the tracks from going round on the top of the tank as well as underneath it. You have to clear all of that. So I spent probably 6 or 7 weeks training for that down in Spain with the horse, because when you stand up on the saddle to make your leap, you don't want the horse to stop or duck sideways or slow down or gallop off. You have to keep his cadence. I have to hit the right stride to get the bounce to clear that distance. And it'll sound funny, but we used to have the manure heap, all the straw and stuff out of the stables. We'd make a big long strip of that, about 2 feet deep. And every day I'd gallop the horse down it. And I'd rocks on one side so he stayed close to the edge, the pretending edge of the cliff. And I'd leap off onto this pile of horse manure. But that was just to get him trained for it, me trained for it. So when we came to do it on the day, there's always a lot of pressure. When you're doing a stunt, there's probably 150 people standing behind the camera all watching you. 145 of them are fascinated. 5 of them think they can do it better than you. It's like a football match. They can all kick the field goal, they can all hit the winning tennis shot till they have to do it. And so there's a lot of pressure when you come to do it, So you want everything in your mind clear, and then you're dealing with a horse that he's got his mind of his own as well. He might not feel like doing it that day. And all those sort of things come into effect. But as long as you rehearse, and it comes through. And the fear factor. There's a wonderful Chinese proverb I use for myself. It goes, fear knocked at the door, knowledge answered, and found no one there. Basically, it's the fear of the unknown. You can be frightened of something, but if you know what the consequences are, you can handle it because you know what the consequences are. But it's the fear of, I don't know what's going to happen. I might die, I might not. It's a wonderful proverb, yeah. Fear knocked at the door, but the knowledge is the practice. And once you have that knowledge, then there is no fear there. It's just nerves, and then nerves we will have to overcome those for many things during life anyway.
Absolutely, I love that. It's beautiful. When you're working with these directors, and you guys are conversing before production, how are they describing to you, Vic, I really want this sequence to feel like this, or Vic, I want him to jump on the train in the car and then crash through the window. How does that collaboration work? And I'm just curious how it turns from an idea into a tangible plan of action, right?
We work very, very, very closely with them, Spielberg or Scorsese or Paul Verhoeven. For instance, the fight on Raiders of the Lost Ark around that revolving aeroplane with Big Pat Roach, a guy I fought in many, many movies from Bonds and everywhere. That had about 50-odd storyboards. We ended up doing over 200 of those setups because it became a creative thing. We were working there and Steven said, I want this, I want that, and Harrison will have his input and so on and so forth. And so that's creative on the day doing it. There's other situations like with Scorsese when we're doing Gangs in New York. He said, I want this, I want people fish hook and tear their lip. He was very descriptive of the graphicness that he wanted. And I got 200 guys in Rome, this is where we shot it, in Cinecittà, trained them in groups of about 15 people in a group and gave them all different routines to do so that I knew the level of the violence they would have. And I'd show it to Marty, and he'd say, that's great, and give me this, give me that. But it's a very, very involved, very close relationship that we work together. And he'd have very specific things that he wanted to demonstrate or achieve. And then I'd do those, and I'd give him my version of it as well. And, but there's also a lot of politics, because when I'm doing that, directors are very precious, and producers, about their product. It's their baby. And
Of course.
sometimes they feel a little bit annoyed at having somebody else come and shoot it, because I directed as well, the action. And they feel somebody else is creating their baby for them or helping with their baby, and they want it to be their one. So you've got to be a diplomat to a certain degree, as you know, in any business. You can't just go and say, I want this, I want that, and this is black, this is white, this is cut, this is dried. You have to be a diplomat, and you have to work around things, and sometimes directors ask you something completely outrageous. I had one particular director, I was working in Greece on a film, and when I first met him, lovely man, he became a great friend of mine, but he was very suspicious of people not getting what he wanted. Anyway, so he started talking. He wanted this sequence of a Greek freedom fighter running along this Corinth Canal, which is a huge canal, runs through Greece, cuts through Greece, where the great liners of oil tankers go through, and it's huge, great road. He wanted him running along there, chased by Germans, and there's a big bridge across. He wanted him to jump off the bridge, which is about 300 feet, into the water. I said, you can't jump 300 feet into the water. I can make it look as though he has. And I described how I could arrange it by building a platform from the bridge 40 foot down below the bridge. You could jump off onto that, and we could descend him and then drop him another 100 feet into the water. No, I've seen it. I've got to do it. I want him to jump off the bridge. And so you tiptoe and tap dance around it. And in the end, I said, look, you can't do it. Anyway, so I finished that one night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, he phoned me, he said, Vic, I've got the answer how he could jump off the bridge and survive. I said, how's that? He could steal a German helmet. Heavens. Anyway, so that's
hilarious.
Now you cut to 3 months later, we're out in Rhodes, in Greece, Rhodos. We're shooting, and he said, come on, Vic, we're going to look at some locations in Athens. Oh, great. So we get a helicopter, we fly up to Athens, and we start walking around, and suddenly I realise I'm now at the Corinth Canal. Mm-hmm. Now little alarm bells going in the back of my head. And we stood there, and it's like 350 feet. It's impossible to jump into. It's like higher than the Golden Gate Bridge. And I said, you can't do it, George. He said, yeah, well, surely I could, I said, you can't. I said, you could go to a lunatic asylum here and get somebody. You might be able to talk them into it. Be done for manslaughter. You can't do it. And I stormed off, and I sat down and had a Turkish coffee. I'll never forget. And I stirred it, which you never do with Turkish coffee because the grounds take 5 minutes to settle. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I sat down, and this guy came and sat next to me, and I looked at him, it was George. And he just sat there, and he went, I wouldn't, I said, you wouldn't what? He said, I'll ask the police. They wouldn't do me for manslaughter. But these are the sort of things you sometimes have to deal with, and then you get the wonderful Marty Scorsese's or Steven Spielberg's, and they're a bit more,
Absolutely.
realistic, but that's part of the fun of the game.
Absolutely. And I'm so fascinated by, it doesn't need to even be said, your body of work is so massive and eclectic, and you're really working at such high levels. But I feel like you've had a front row seat as well to the technological evolution of things, right? Through 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s to this digital, CGI world we're in today. How has that influenced the way you work? To what degree does it?
It's a huge influence nowadays, but Wendy and I were having dinner last time we were in LA with Frank Marshall and Kathy Kennedy, because we're all on Raiders, we're buddies since those days. And we all agreed we've lived through what we think the golden age of modern cinema, from the 70s, 80s through to the mid-90s, where there was a certain mixture of visual effects, but there was a huge amount of realistic, honest action. And then it got into the 2000s, and I think the visual effects have gone too far. But it's the type of movies they're making, the DC Comics superhero movies. We did Superman together, Wendy and myself, and we had visual effects on that, but it was not to the extent that they do visual effects nowadays. And I do believe that visual effects is a stuntman's get out of jail free card. It's a wonderful tool if you use it correctly. And I equate it to morphine. Morphine is an incredible drug for the right ailment. It stops the pain and can cure this and that. And it's a great healer, a great help. Used and abused, it will kill. And I have the same love-hate relationship with visual effects. It can do the same thing. Overused. I know a lot of people go into a film and they're purely going to do a sequence before they start it. It's all going to be visual effects. They have cables and wires and things. We grew up in a situation where everything had to be on camera, as we say. What you see is what's going to go in the movie. So if there's a pad there, you have to paint it, you have to hide it. Even on Superman, we used to have the wires. We were outside flying in front of a wall. They'd paint the wires the same color as the wall because they couldn't erase it in those days. One man had to rotoscope it, which is one man taking a frame at a time and painting it out. Nowadays, a computer does it in a heartbeat. So it gives people the ability to do it, and I think that crushes the creativity of realism. Anybody can do anything in post, and you're basically making a cartoon. But I love the idea of whenever I read a script, I break it down as though we're doing everything for real, and then we break it down until you get to the situation. Well, this is impossible, like jumping off the Corinth Canal, or whatever. And you break it down to the elements, and okay, now how can the visual effects people help us with this? And they can do fantastic stuff, but don't build your story around that to begin with. Use that as your get out of jail free card. And it is a wonderful thing. And AI, goodness knows what's going to happen with AI now. But I've just finished the Rings of Power, which is the prequel to the Lord of the Rings. It's the third season. We did one season in New Zealand, and then the last two seasons we've done in London. And prior to that, in between those two seasons, I did Wednesday with Tim Burton in Ireland. And there's a huge amount of visual effects in that, but we still go into it with the idea of let's do as much as we can for real, even though everybody's, they know there's going to be a million CG shots in a series like that. We still try and do it. All the big horse chases, we know we can't have, 400 horses. We'll replicate them, but we'll do it in such a way so that it doesn't look just like they're coming out of a photo machine. They're all in different positions and different movements. So it's how you use it. And I think it's a wonderful tool, but it can be misused.
Understood. Could you tell me a bit about this push to get your craft as a stunt coordinator designer recognized by the Academy? Because it does feel, I'm a total film nerd, but I'm kind of not as informed maybe as I should be about the sort of legacy of your work and your peers' work. And can you tell me a bit about what's happening to get all that recognition?
It's moving forward. The first stunt Oscar will be presented in 27. There's a subcommittee at the moment, which I'm on, and we're going through all the protocols because there's lots of details that have to be ironed out and everything else. But they've agreed to it, the Academy. I'm a member of the Academy, and so we're meeting regularly about that, and it is well overdue. We do contribute an awful lot. We sit down in productions when they're starting. We write whole sequences and we direct whole sequences. I have my own unit on the Rings of Power or Wednesday and such, which I direct. The whole sequence. We have all the actors come over to us, and we do. It's a huge part of the jigsaw puzzle of making movies, and It's not a sort of an Oscar for somebody that's been blown up with the biggest bang or made the biggest fire or crashed a car that rolled 100 times or whatever. It's the integral and the creativity that we put into that movie to make the whole patchwork of the movie come alive and tell the story. They're all story moving sequences and and ideas that we come up with. So it's been a long time coming. It'll be, I think it's the 100th Oscars that we will get ours in, but it's very exciting. Probably too late for me, but I've got my BAFTA anyway, and so I've got an Academy Award, which is the science and technology one, but I won't get an Oscar, I don't think. But it's wonderful that some stuntman will stand up there and get a legit Oscar. It'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. To that point, I'm curious because I think your line of work, the immediate thought is, yeah, the flashy bomb going into the building, blowing up, et cetera, walking away, et cetera. But do you have a sequence that you've designed or worked on or been a double on that you feel is like a perceived as a minor sequence, but it's something that you're really, really proud of? Uh,
I Most of the sequences I'm really proud of. I've done a lot of Bonds. I did the last three for Pierce Brosnan. I still think the ice chase I did on, I think it was Die Another Day out in Iceland, is a beautiful sequence with big, wide, what I call my David Lean shots. I love big, wide shots.
mhm.
You've got this huge glacier, and I've always got good weather karma, and we went out there, and all the sun melted the snow off these icebergs in this lake, a frozen lake that we were filming on. So you had these wonderful blue icebergs, and the blue lake was all glistening because it was quite hot. And the great glacier coming down with some big helicopter shots, these two cars basically doing a ballet around this frozen lake. I'm very proud of that, which I wrote. I wrote the whole sequence based on the location. That's a fabulous sequence. And there's another one I did, which is the boat chase down the Thames. That was fabulous.
Mhm.
It's a great fun ride. No visual effects in that, apart from they put torpedoes in. They wouldn't shoot torpedoes in the Thames for some reason or other. But you see the whole of London, the House of Parliament, the Tower Bridge, and there's some great action in that. And they're wonderful sequences, and they move the whole story forward. The boat chase is where Bond is chasing after this girl, and all the script said was Bond leaves MI6 in a boat, and we want him to arrive at the Dome. There's that big dome they
Mhm.
built in London, and we want a hot air balloon involved. And I filled everything in between from there. So
Oh, wow.
that's the sort of involvement and commitment we put into a movie, and moving the story along. It's a great example of it.
Absolutely. Last question, Vic, is, to a young person who maybe aspires to follow in this line of work, what advice do you have for them to sort of move through the world?
I think go for it. Whatever your skill is, you have to have some natural attribute, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's sword fencing, whether it's high diving, riding horses. Like that's all I could do when I came into the business was ride horses, and I could ride them. I'd ridden all my life, day and night. Whether it's motorcycling, cars, fighting, but get to the highest ability you can in that job, because that's what you'll be hired for, that you're better than anybody else. And then you've really got to, it's hard work. You've got to be a team player. It's a very unselfish game. You've got to give for everybody. You have to support your friends, and you have to help them. You don't expect any accolades, because although nowadays Harrison and people like that, they promote us stuntmen more than anybody. They're fabulous, the modern actors. They love it. But in the olden days, it was taboo. You must never say an actor was doubled. They still pretended to the public that they did everything themselves, and which the public are not silly. They understand. But you're not really going to get the heroic. I've been lucky because I've had Harrison pushing me, but you're not going to get those great tributes and things. But nor should you, because you don't deserve them. Because the people are going to see that particular actor on the screen, and that's what you have to remember. They don't want to see you on the screen. If you bust your arm, okay, that's a hard luck, buddy. Bring the next one on. That's part of the job. That's why we get the extra $5. uh, but yeah, just do what you do, but do it the best you can, and then start expanding your abilities. Learn sword fencing like I did. Learn high falls. Learn trampolining. Learn all these things. But most importantly, learn about filmmaking. I sit on the set. Even though I'm not working, I watch and I watch. I watch every different director. They all got different ways of doing things. And I've directed my own movies and everything else, but you still learn something every time. And that's what you do. It's such a vastly changing business, especially now. They watch and see what the visual effects people are doing, see how they do it, because sometimes you can suggest things to them that should be done, and But just get your skill and be the best you can at it, and then be like a sponge and absorb everything else you can, and don't be work shy, because it's 5 o'clock in the morning till 7 at night on the set all day long, traveling. And I've worked in over 70, 80 countries around the world. It's a lot of traveling and things like that, if you're lucky enough to get it. But to get into it, we're very privileged to be working in it, because there's a lot worse jobs. People obviously sometimes say to me, ever going to retire? And I said, why would I want to retire and stop doing what I love doing, working with all my pals, playing cowboys and Indians all day long, and earn a lot of money for it? Why would I want to stay at home and do nothing? I can't play golf well anyway, so I soon get bored with that.
That's a fair argument. All right, well, last question then to that point. What is something you want to explore in this phase of your career at this point? What is something that that makes you curious or intrigued?
I I'm pretty not confident. I'm pretty satisfied with everything I've achieved. I would have loved to have directed a blockbuster movie, but that's never going to happen. But I've directed my movies; they've been very successful, and I've personally very, very satisfied with what I achieved, what they were, from Young Indy to Sunday Horse and things like that, and Joshua Tree. I'm quite happy, but I'm now happy watching my kids go along. We've got the fourth generation of our family. She's 7 years old now, and she's been in the Power of the Rings, and she's fourth generation.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fabulous. And, the whole family, I've got 2 daughters and 2 sons, a nephew, a brother, and everybody's busy working all the time. One of my sons just did the Formula One movie, a special effects boss, and they're all doing very, very well. And working with Tom Cruise. My other son has been done the last 6 or 7 with Tom Cruise, who's fabulous. And no, I'm actually quite satisfied with my life now. I'm just enjoying it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for the time, Vic. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.